we are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
All right, we're here. We made it. I'm back. Hi. Hello, this is Robert Phoenix, and you are now listening to Free Association Radio, the Monday edition, also known as the Friday Forecast, or sorry, Monday Mashup. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night, so it's going to take a few minutes for me to get my synapses in gear and connect with every single part of my etheric nature and bring it online for you here and now. It is Monday the 30th, the last day of September. We move into October, and the weather here has shifted nicely. We had a couple of torrential storms over the weekend, and it has really blown out the heat wave. The fevered heat of summer has broken, and it is nothing but blue skies and soon-to-be rust-colored leaves. Although it's getting greener rather than browner and redder in this part of the world. How is everybody? How was your weekend? We are hurtling now towards October and November. And of course, November is a biggie. It's a biggie. We've got a lot going down in November. Perhaps the prelude to November is the shutdown. It's the annual governmental shutdown sweepstakes, which we play once a year when the budget comes up. And of course, the cross around the budget's neck this time around is Obamacare. The Republicans are digging their heels in, and they are threatening not to fund the budget because they don't want Obamacare to get enacted. Well, they should have thought of this before they signed the goddamn thing. Okay, look, I'm not a fan of Obamacare. I know what's behind Obamacare. It is essentially about managing you and me out of the picture at a certain point in time. It is the rampant spread of allopathic medicine. It has nothing to do with preventative medicine. It is really a blueprint for some kind of fascistic, and I mean fascistic and eugenically based care in a way that we've never seen before in this country. Now, Western medicine as a whole is pretty rotten. I mean, it does some good things. It's great in triage and the emergency room. It's fantastic there. It's unparalleled. Being able to sew a limb back onto another limb is remarkable what they can do. But the overall sort of thrust of Western medicine is anything but healing. Anything but healing at all. It's actually a pretty unhealing kind of experience. So, but with Obamacare, you know, one of the authors behind Obamacare was Zeke Emanuel, Rahm Emanuel's brother. And there's a really interesting YouTube video of Zeke Emanuel having some kind of hearing in front of people that are having questions and wanting to probe deeper into Obamacare, and his background is brought up, and books that he's written, and chapters from books that he's written about his theories on health, and they're incredibly Malthusian and eugenically based. So Obamacare, which nobody read, it was just rubber stamped. It was written by Emanuel and by the healthcare providers, the top 4 insurance providers. And this is their baby. This is their way to get into the pocketbooks of Americans across the country. Now, I'm not a fan of Obamacare, but if the Republicans had such a stink about it, they probably should have voted it down sooner than later. You know, we're at the 11th hour, and it is the cross around the neck, the public's neck, and we're going to have to deal with that at some point in time here over the course of the next week. Now, the shutdown, on one level, wouldn't really mean much. You'd still get your mail. You'd still get your Social Security. You would not be able to go to any national parks, okay? So if you're a person that thinks about Agenda 21 and land grabs, well, the shutdown might be a really great way to initiate that, to just shut down all the national parks and then have them unopened from that point forward, closed down. Now, the really great news about the shutdown is that, while DHS will still be fully employed, you don't have to worry about that. Oh, no, sirree, Bob. And all those good folks at the TSA, they'll be employed too. So don't you fret. Your security will not be threatened if the shutdown does occur. We have the sequestration, and we have the shutdown, and we are potentially looking at the global reset. And this might have a lot to do with what we're going to be staring down in November. So keep your eyes on the road and hands upon the wheel, as Mr. Mojo Rising once said. Okay, so today's show, a good portion of it will be dedicated to my next guest, and we got together probably about a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago, and we talked about his book and a lot of other things. Your Love Incomplete, a wonderful, wonderful book, and a lot of other good stuff that he's done. Cactus Land is his website. He's been a marketing consultant, a trader. He's a jack of all trades. In fact, I think he might even be a double Gemini. We're going to find that out. From Russia with Love, it's our friend Robert Bonomo. Hello, Robert.
Hey, hello. Robert, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on?
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Not much. Everything's good.
Good. This is great. You know, you are in Russia. I'm in Texas. We got a solid connection. The wonders of the internet and the technological age, eh?
It is amazing.
Yeah. Really, to step back for a moment, to think that maybe 20 years ago, you know, this kind of experience. I was in the internet world back in 1996, 97. I worked for an internet sort of cyber futuristic magazine, and we talked about these things from an ideal perspective, like, oh yeah, we could accomplish that. The framework for it was there, but it was still a really big idea. And here we are, in real time, broadcasting, streaming live, halfway around the world, and the quality of this is remarkable. Have you ever just stepped back every now and then and just looked at technology and said, man, this is kind of amazing, and this is really cool,
yeah.
And where's it all going?
Exactly. I don't know if we talked about this, but I remember having lunch with a guy in around 2000 from mp3.com.
Yep.
And he came from the music industry, and he told us, he said, the music industry is dead. And we couldn't believe him. I remember as a kid, I spent all my money on music. And,
right.
He was basically right.
Yeah. Now that dovetails with my background in history. I was at eMusic, and we were a competitor of mp3.com. And
sure.
In fact, they had actually had the opportunity to buy the name mp3.com but the company or the guy that had the domain name wanted something like $100,000. Well, it would have been a pittance to pay, especially because the people at eMusic had quite a bit of startup capital. But I'll never forget this. I was at there was a music festival that runs in San Francisco once a year. It's called Pop Noise, and it's kind of a rock and roll sort of indie thing. And I remember being at a panel, and I'm sitting there at the panel, and these people are talking about the future of digital music. And there's a guy who's a journalist on the panel, and he had just had kind of an experience and lunch with people from a company called Napster. And he went on to describe Napster. And he said, I guarantee you that the music industry will never be the same. This is the atomic bomb of the music industry. So this is before anybody else had heard of Napster. And I'm thinking, great, I am working now for their legal competitor. What does this mean for me, right? So this was just at the beginning of 2000, and he, you know what? He was absolutely right. So what's going on in your world? What's happening with your novel? Are you getting any traction? Are you getting some feedback from the last show that we did?
Yeah, I'm getting some. I got some good feedback from the last show. I'm continuing to do other shows. And I'm starting to write a column now for a gold dealer. So I'll be writing a column 3 days a week. Mm-hmm. And so things are really moving along. Starting the new novel, everything's good.
That's
working
great.
Hard.
That's great. I know you've been in touch with my friend Richard over at North Atlantic Books, and talking to him about a potential project. And that's great. Richard is a great guy. I can't recommend him enough. And his publishing company, North Atlantic Books, is a great resource for many different things, and perhaps this would be a good segue for what we want to talk about. He's even published, I think, at least one, if not two, of Vladimir Putin's books on judo. So
right, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. So that's over there at NAB. So let's get into Putin and Russia. A lot has happened since the last time we talked.
Wow.
Putin and Lavrov jumped into the fray, Putin, of course, being a Libra, October 7th, and decided to play peacemaker. What's it like over there around all this, Robert?
Yeah, I mean, I think people have the feeling that, Putin really kind of is center stage now. He's really, he's kind of taken that role back that I think that the Russians haven't seen since the Soviet times on an international level. They feel like they've got their mojo back, and I think they do, in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
He took Obama behind the shed, as they say down south.
So, what was here in this country? I'll give you kind of the third eye view, right? The eye in the sky view of what was happening here. The war drums were beating heavily. You've got Frankencarry running around, going to Syria. He's going to Russia. He's going anywhere that people will listen to him, so that he can feebly present the case for war. And they're doing everything that they can in the United States on the mainstream media to sell this thing. I mean, it's really coming at us pretty hard. And at the same time, there was a major pushback from the people. I mean, I've never seen anything quite like this since the economic crisis of October 2008. And people really en masse decided to say no, 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 no. Their representatives were getting the message loud and clear. Obama was having a very hard time selling this to Congress, but it was hot and heavy here. What was the general vibe and attitude like in Russia around all of this as we were sort of steamrolling our way towards World War III there?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Since I've been here, I've realized that, politics for us in the States, it's entertainment. It really is. It's like professional wrestling, but no, I guess it's real. Here, honestly, people don't care. And for example, the whole tradition we have of reading the newspaper, I'm amazed. Very few people read the newspaper. People are not really interested in politics all that much. So here, I have to. I mean, honestly, it wasn't such a big deal. Just because of the way I think Russians in general approach politics and world events. Well, they kind of blow it off a little bit. They don't have like the Fox News kind of, banging the drums with that music and, everyone get all excited. They take it, it's a lot different here. I think it was probably more taken on a higher level.
Yeah, I have a good friend of the show who was in Kazakhstan right around the same time that this was all going on between Russia and the U.S. And, his take was that, much like yours, that people really were not that interested. I mean, they went about their lives, they did their business, they were not so tied into the body politique, as we seem to be here. We're actually kind of, jerked around and moved around with every, little story, every little message, every little prompt, every little trigger. It's a fascinating kind of way to live a life, apart from the political apparatus. Is it because people there are more disinterested, or they just trust their own process and government more?
Oh, it's a really interesting question. My feeling is people here are much more cynical. So they really have disconnected, in a sense, much more than, say, Americans do. Americans still believe the myth of who they are and their exceptionalism and all that. Russians, after the Soviet Union, that's gone. People here are very practical. Show me the money. Their family, their friends, what's real. And they don't get too worked up with these sort of these things that Americans do. Because in a lot of sense, I mean, for Americans, what do they really care what goes on in Syria? But you figure the media had everybody in almost in hysterical mode, no?
Right.
So it's a real different way of looking at things.
Well, the other thing too, and this is, I think, a really big piece, is that if you look at Russia from the post-Soviet era, their incursions into conflicts, foreign conflicts, is almost minimal, right? They have focused primarily on building their infrastructure and some form of capitalism, which I'd like to talk with you about because that's part of your world. Meanwhile, here in the U.S., from 2002 on, it's really been one incursion or one hegemonic push into one region, either directly or with some of the color revolutions indirectly after another. So we have been engaged in all of these conflicts abroad, and there's a reason why I think we have had such a very strong and visceral reaction to what happened or what was about to happen there. But Russia's slate is pretty clean since the break. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean they've been focused on really I mean the 90s here were terrible. I mean when people talk about the 1990s here, it was horrible. I mean it was just mafias and disorder and infrastructure just collapsing. It was really difficult. And things I think really since the Putin era have improved greatly on a basic kind of everyday kind of a sense of what's going on in everyday life. So yeah, it's they're not I really don't think they're focused on the kind of expansionism that the United States is. And I think that the American view of Russia is very distorted. Very distorted. I mean, we could go into that too. I mean, it goes back to Jacob Schiff and the Russian-Japanese War, where he was loaning money to the Japanese and would not loan anything to the Tsar. I mean, that's sort of mainstream history.
Of course, Jacob Schiff,
sort of
the money man for the Rothschild, the House of Rothschild, here in this country. That's fascinating stuff. So, when was this? Around 1910, 1909, right around there.
Yeah, that war was 1905, so this would be right at the turn of the century. They really had it in for the Russians, and you see that with the Wall Street connection with the Bolsheviks. How did Trotsky get out of New York? That's always been interesting. I mean, he got held in. They held him in Canada.
That's
and,
right.
And then they let him go.
That's
and
right.
Lenin, when he came into St. Petersburg, I mean, he had money.
Well,
he gave it to him.
Yeah. Now we're talking about the funding of the Bolshevik Revolution through the House of Rothschild, Jacob Schiff, and the whole New York connection, and that's where it all really takes hold. The story goes. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. I just think folks really need to dig a little bit in there, because you see that antagonism going from before the Cold War. This is pre-Cold War. There's been that antagonism, especially since from New York money and what's been going on in Russia. No, it's an ugly history. It's not pretty.
So what is it like there for somebody like yourself who has dabbled in a lot of different trades and careers, but mostly around money, finance, markets? What's capitalism like right now?
I think it's a little bit like it might have been in like the 1920s in the United States. I mean, the margins are incredible. You go to a store and you'll see 40% margins on beer, butter, milk. No, it's pretty wild. And in a sense, it's almost more. It's not so completely corporatized, Walmartized. No, people can go out with a little bit of money and some guts, let's say, and make some money. But it's a little bit like the Wild West.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's pretty wild.
So that was really kind of the description after the fall of the wall. It was really just it was like a boom town. Everybody's trying to get their hands in the pie and try to get some of the resources. So you're saying that that's still kind of the prevalent attitude there? What about, can you get loans from banks? What are banks like in Russia? What's that whole scene like? Yeah.
Yeah, the banking system has become pretty standardized. The only thing is the interest rates are extremely high. Mm-hmm. Having worked in banks, when I look at the interest rates that they're charging, I just salivate. I mean, when I remember my marketing campaigns, thinking about the margins the banks are making. Because there's not that level of competitiveness that you'd see in, say, Western Europe or in the States. No, so a bank with a strong position, their margins are a little bit better than I'd say that they are in the States and Europe.
Mm-hmm. Now, are these state-run banks, or are they privately funded and owned?
Some of them are state-run, half state-run, and then there's privately owned banks. Privately owned insurance companies. It's the market here is, I would say, relatively open to big multinationals. I think small folks coming here could have problems. No, it's a more complex sort of integrated with the government. It's almost like the Chinese model in the sense where you have the government and industry very much in sync with each other.
Right.
On many levels.
Yeah. Really, that was kind of the gist of my questions and my probing, was to find out, how this model is evolving, because that's exactly how China's model is. Is it as ironclad as China's? China seems to be really driven by government first in some ways, that they won't do anything unless it kind of seamlessly interlocks with their political system. Is that the same case with Russia now, or is there more wiggle room?
Oh, I think there's a lot more wiggle room here, much more wiggle room. But still, no, the big power structures, are pretty integrated into the political system. It's not cut and dry. You're either in politics and you're in business. No, there's more of a sort of a gray area. And I think for foreigners it's got to be very difficult, very difficult. And that goes back. We could talk about this. It gets a little complicated, but that whole Magnitsky affair. Remember the lawyer who was killed in the that was a fascinating case. Because he worked for a hedge fund, the Hermitage Fund, by what's his name, William Browder, who's not even an American. And so basically, he got his money out of Russia, not all of it. And then some things happened, and with some of his companies, they made shell companies. They bought them, they sold them. There was a tax credit. They took the tax credit. His attorney wound up getting killed, and that became an international scandal. And basically, it was about when international capital comes into Russia, if somebody takes that money, what would the reaction be? You know? And that was a very interesting affair.
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to also ask you a little bit here as a kind of just a day-to-day thing. Like we pay about anywhere between $3.29 here in Austin to about close to $4 for a gallon of gas. What's the average person pay for a gallon of gas in Russia?
It's about, hold on a second, 30 rubles is about $1 a liter. Yeah, it's about I would say it's about, I'd say like $3.80, $4 if you're talking in gallons. There's no discount. It's market price. So it's not like you get a cheaper gallon of gas. So I'd say it's close to $4 a gallon.
Interesting. So it's about the same.
It's about $1 a liter.
Do people drive there as much as they do in the States? Has there been a push for the auto industry, or is it a lot of public transportation still?
Yeah, for a lot of people have cars here. It's a big deal. People, they're very much, especially Japanese cars in the Far East where I am. There's lots of Japanese cars. It's funny too because they drive on the right side of the road, but they drive on the same side that we do, but they have Japanese cars with the steering wheel on the other side.
Oh, that's wild.
So it can be kind of funny. You go to get in the car, and I always wind up going in the wrong side of the car.
That is really funny. And if you're taking that left-hand turn that's utterly dyslexic. Wow. Another question I wanted to ask you. It was just hanging around in my head. What was it? Oh man, I'm sorry. I'm having to reconnect all my synapses from a serious lack of sleep last night. How is living in a foreign country? Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you. This is what I wanted. This was an astrological question because obviously, you're dialed into this. I looked at Russia's chart. Once the Soviet Union collapsed and they basically redid their constitution, I looked at their chart and they're almost completely Capricornian. I think there's about 4 planets in Capricorn with Russia's chart. Have you looked at this at all?
I haven't looked at the chart, but I was listening to your show the other day when you were talking about I can't remember what it was, but you were talking about how Russia is Capricornian, no?
Yeah.
And it makes so much sense. You just get that feeling here, no? This is a very, very earthy country. Very. People are extremely practical. You get that feeling. And it is interesting with the opposition, the Capricorn-Cancer opposition with the states, no? And now we have Pluto in Capricorn. What does that mean for their chart? No, I think it could mean a lot, no?
Well, I think that, and I've given this, some thought, and I think that it actually bodes well for them. I think it's actually a very powerful and transformational kind of energy. Obviously, whenever you play with Pluto, you're playing with something pretty explosive, and it can go either way. It can either completely burn you out to the core, or it will be able to transform your essence completely. Either way, you're going to be dealing with issues around power. And it feels to me like what happened between the U.S. and Russia in this little chess game that they did around Syria, that was kind of a Pluto and Capricorn coup for Russia, the former Soviet Union. And in opposition to the American sun in Cancer, because America has been getting its way, or used to getting its way, thanks to all of its international financiers and other interests. But it was definitely it's not opposing classically. the American sun. It comes much later. But nonetheless, it's opposing the notion of what that Cancerian sun in some ways stands for. Now, there are people who debate whether or not the U.S. is a Gemini rising country or a Scorpio rising country or a Sagittarius rising country. I would tend to think it's a Sagittarius rising country based on the Sibley chart and the stuff that I've looked at, which would mean that Pluto is in the second house of the U.S. chart. And that makes a lot of sense to me because we're dealing with core issues right now. We're dealing with things like healthcare. We're dealing, which is in some ways, a very fundamental second house kind of events. The Obamacare thing. So it feels to me like Pluto in Capricorn in this instance really favored Russia as it relates to the power exchange. And there was a power exchange that took place there during that whole Syria.
And I just finished an article on this that I'm going to publish probably tomorrow. And if we look at the petrodollar, really what was going on in Syria was, I think, a lot about gas. And when you think about it from a gas perspective, it makes an enormous amount of sense because with Assad there, that Saudi Qatari gas is not getting to Europe. Gazprom is protected. If Assad leaves or is forcibly removed, eventually they're going to take that Qatari gas and send it through Turkey to Europe. That hurts Russia a lot. So that was really, I think, that was the play, I think. And Pluto, I mean, how would you think about this? Pluto, I know mining, gold, that sort of stuff. Pluto, no, oil does come from under the ground. I mean,
oil's Neptunian. Oil's a Neptunian. Element. Anything that's hard, any of the hard metals are Taurus. And if you get into, like, say, for instance, gold is Taurus, but gold certificate is Scorpio, right? Because you're portioning some kind of value other than that of the actual hard metal itself. So it would be third party, other people's money. Anything that gets translated into paper certificates would be Scorpio. So in terms of the gas thing, I think we'd look at, Neptune in Pisces, or Chiron in Pisces. Those things would start to come to the surface as well, And what's interesting is that I think you're talking about, maybe it's two different things, but one of the things that came up here pretty quickly was this Genie, G-E-N-I-E, oil, gas and oil, which was a joint venture between Dick Cheney and the Israelis and the Golan Heights gas and running that pipeline through Syria. Did you see this?
No, I was talking about I think there was the Nabucco one that was going to come from Qatar into Turkey, and then there's a possible Iranian one that could come into Syria, and then by ship it would be taken to Europe. And then I did hear a little bit about this one about Cheney, but I didn't have the details on that one.
Yeah, apparently, and this is what I was, what people here in this country were dissecting, is that Cheney and the Israelis, through the House of Rothschild, discovered that there is a major gas find in the Golan Heights which extends into Syria. And they want Syria so they can go in there and exploit that. And that was kind of a big deal. And that's why Israel, amongst other things, was really pushing for this war with between the U.S. and Syria. Nobody else wanted a piece of it, obviously, but the U.S. Tons of pressure from AIPAC. Now, there's another side of this, and it's kind of interesting. I had a conversation with Jay Widener not long ago when I was in Boulder, Colorado, and Jay told me that they have friends inside the Democratic Party, and the scuttlebutt at a high level when they got together, when all the big donors got together for the Democratic Party, was that there is extreme anger towards Israel because Netanyahu went to Florida to campaign for Mitt Romney. And once
I've
that
heard that.
happened,
I heard, there's some bad blood.
Yeah, once that happened, they decided that they were going to drag their heels and not cooperate with Israel at a high level. Now, that's the Obama administration. Then you have all these underlings throughout the House and the Senate who are essentially there because they are AIPAC sanctioned candidates. And they have to somehow represent AIPAC in their decision-making process. But at the same time, they're also getting these kind of top-down orders from the Obama administration and the DNS. It's really a very interesting dynamic going on. And I just read something about a day and a half ago which stated that Syria and Iran are off the table until Obama leaves office. That's kind of the official word on the street now. So Netanyahu and all these other guys can, put up as much bluster as possible about what's happening in Iran and their nuclear capabilities, and when they, reach a certain point, they're a danger to the world. But all it is right now is just sound and fury, because the Obama administration has effectively disabled their ability to deal with any kind of bidding that Israel wants or needs in the Middle East. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be financial implications. There's all kinds of other crazy stuff that can go on. But at a high level, I think both of those countries now are off the table.
Yeah, the only thing I found very interesting, did you read Putin's op-ed in the New York Times?
I heard about it. I didn't read it, but I heard about it.
There's one line in there that was very interesting. He said, and there's evidence of a possible false flag in Israel. So Putin put this in the op-ed, and I think that my feeling was he didn't put it. He put it there for a real reason, in the sense that would have been the next move. No, I mean, if the chess game was going to continue to the end, then okay, right. Then then there's the attack on Israel, and then you have to respond.
Right.
And by saying that, it would have been very difficult to pull it off. Imagine if that was really in the works, and then all of a sudden he publishes. I think that's the reason he published that op-ed, and it's something that was not talked about. It was not talked about a lot, that sentence, and it's a very interesting sentence. He said, and there's evidence that there's another attack being planned on Israel, and I think that was the plan, and I think he blocked it. It was very interesting. But it's hard to tell with everything that's going on now with Iran. Netanyahu's having a pretty big tizzy fit about Obama talking to the Iranians. It really does seem that Obama's taking a different tack on this. It's hard to tell what the end game is.
Yeah, I think they are, and I forget which one. I think it's Susan Rice. It's either Susan Rice or Valerie Jarrett. One of them was actually born in Iran, and has
yes. Mm-hmm.
And I think has either a Persian or a Ladino Jewish mother, one of the two. And so there is a connection inside the White House itself with Iran. I think it is Susan Rice, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, I think that they in a very interesting, strange kind of way, they have somehow managed to turn this tide with this, overt Israeli neocon influence, which really dominated the Bush administration. Now, I'm not saying that the Obama administration is great. I'm not a fan, but they've managed to somehow kind of divert this full-on influence from Israel, which I think is actually interesting. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, but I think there's a very, very dangerous element to all this, and that is that Obama, I really think he wanted to do that attack, and the people stopped him. And I mean, I know it sounds a bit naive, but I think it really was true. There was just no support for this at all.
I agree.
And he had to back off. But in the future now, if I were the Iranians, imagine if they start sending 2-3 divisions into Syria. There is no will in this country at all to go to war. I mean, from the American standpoint, at all. And I think that weakness is dangerous. I think it's very dangerous because, I mean, even the Saudi Arabians, we backed off with Mubarak, which very much annoyed them. Finally, we put the generals back in power, but still, the Saudis weren't happy there. And apparently the Saudis are furious about these negotiations with Iran because they're sending money into Syria for the rebels. The Iranians are obviously supporting Assad, and they're not very happy. I think it's you've talked about these dates, October, November, and I really, really think that you're onto something with those dates.
Well, I mean, everything seems to be coming to a head on some level. On another level, just kind of when I look at it internally, it feels as though that there was a certain amount of momentum kind of heading in a certain direction, which was, feeling heavily totalitarian, like the massive boot was going to come down. And while I don't feel that to the same extent that I did a few months ago, but I do feel like that there is some kind of conclusion, some kind of resolution that we're dealing with here over the course of the next 60 days. That's my sense, because there's just too much being stretched out, in terms of the economy, in terms of some of the geopolitical stuff. What's happening with gold? You're writing for a gold newspaper right now. What's going on with gold and precious metals in general?
I think it's a fascinating moment because they keep getting pushed down. I mean, the pressure down. It's who's pushing gold down? I mean, I have a theory. I mean, this is my theory. I'll throw it out there. I mean, I think, and it's not at all original. I mean, there are strong paper shorts against gold. I mean, there's a conspiracy to keep gold down. Gold is the enemy. And a few weeks ago, Bernanke just wanted to tap on the brakes. The famous, the famous taper, And in the end, he couldn't do it. So, I mean, he can't stop printing. That's a very scary. That's like being on a train that's going 200 miles an hour and you can't touch the brakes.
Right.
And if you look at the price of gold, it's not reacting the way it should be. That should have sent gold skyrocketing, and it didn't.
Right.
No, there was a move, but it wasn't a drastic move. I think that moment, the fact that Bernanke was unable just to cut, it was $10 billion a month. He couldn't do it. The market started getting very nervous, and now we have this government shutdown. I mean, imagine the dollar. What's backing the dollar? A military that can't act. The people have no will to fight. So you can have all these guns, but if you can't use them, it's not supporting the dollar or the petrodollar. You have Bernanke who's printing money. He can't even just shave off a few billion a month without the markets going ballistic. I think it's a very scary moment. Now you have this shutdown. This government shutdown is really from outside the states. It's pathetic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a family that can't renew the credit card. All they have, it's like they have to just send in the paper and renew it. They can't agree to renew the credit card. So I think our gold is very, very, I would say, artificially being suppressed. And when it breaks out, it's going to go crazy.
And we've gone through this shutdown thing over the last 2 or 3 years, and it almost always gets resolved in the 11th hour. And what that's done is it's bred kind of a sense of fait accompli in many people, that they just, believe that it will get solved because it's been solved before. I think that's a dangerous attitude. I'm not sure that it will always get solved, and it could be used for the purpose of some kind of, major kind of, I don't know, transformation, not really in a positive way either, at least initially. What's your thoughts on that?
I totally agree with you, because the ones before, you know how they always say, buy the rumor or sell the news?
Yeah.
Well, I guess in this case it would be sell the news, buy the rumor. No, but I have that feeling that this time is different. And here's my thinking on this: if you're the Republicans, and I have no interest in partisan politics at all, but I'm just looking at it as a game, no sort of game theory. What do the Republicans have to lose? They put the gun to Obama's head and they say, you either give us everything we want or we'll shut down the government. In the end, Obama's president. If you have a government that's shut down, Obama's going to pay the political price, especially after what happened in Syria. I mean, let's face it, he's looking a little bit weak. I mean, even the New York Times is kind of starting to turn on him a little bit. If there's a government collapse, I think if I was a Republican strategist, I would say no negotiating, nothing, give nothing, and he'll cave. He caved to the Russians, and he'll cave to the House. So I think it's extremely dangerous. And this guy, what's this guy from Texas, Cruz? That whole type of politics, I think, could be a little dangerous when you're talking about the debt ceiling. Because this is serious stuff. This is the kind of thing that all of a sudden the Russians and the Chinese start selling treasury bonds. Yeah. And the whole thing just can happen. This shoe can fall anytime. And this, I think you're right, that it's happened so many times and people have just gotten complacent. Yeah. And it could be scary.
Yeah, well, I think that the biggest issue straight out of the gate, I mean, one of the things that I've talked about, we've looked at quite a bit on my show, is Agenda 21. And I live in a city that is one of the poster cities for Agenda 21 here in Austin. It's green, everything. I can't even get a grocery bag from the grocery store now. I've got to bring my own, or I've got to pay them a quarter, which is great for the grocery stores because they don't have to buy bags anymore. If they do, they're compensated a quarter per bag. Good for them, not so great for if you forget your grocery bag or you're not well trained, one of the two. But one of the things that Agenda 21 brings about is the fact that they want to move people off. They want to move people off wild lands. They want to move people off unincorporated areas. They want to return the wildlands basically back to their original state, their pristine state where animals run free and only the really wealthy can go in there and experience them and can have access to them. Now, if this shutdown occurs, one of the things that will happen is that the national park system will be shut down immediately. That means you cannot go camping. Now, we're entering into the colder months here with October, November, December, and some people might make a case for, well, it's not really a prime time to go to these campsites or to go to these parks, but what's to suggest that if they can make that kind of case, what's to suggest they'll ever open again in the spring and the summer? So I think that there are some pieces here that if there was a shutdown that could fall, that would not necessarily come back online after the quote-unquote shutdown gets resolved. That's my sense.
No, I think it's, and I think that they could use this as the excuse, because I think most people would agree that a monetary reset has to occur.
Right.
When is anybody's guess. They can kick the can for a long time, but at one point it's going to have to happen. And this might be the moment.
It could be.
Where there's a certain level of panic, and then they can make the changes they have to make.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And what's interesting, too, about this shutdown is that enough services would actually still exist so that people could have the semblance of, business as usual. Like, for instance, all the mail will be delivered, right? So the USPS won't be shut down, which is interesting in and of itself because, sometimes they're connected to the government and sometimes they're not. It's a very strange entity, but, you'll still be able to get your mail. So there's a semblance of normality. There's other things, like, for instance, you'll still be able to go through the scanner at the airport and have somebody grope you if you want that, right? I mean, so all these things on kind of a superficial level will give people a sense that it's business as usual. But if you go beneath the surface, other things are happening and could be much more drastic. Another aspect of this is the WIC program, Women in Children in Need, which is essentially like food stamps. I mean, you get WIC, you get to, you get your little WIC card, you go to the store, you buy your diapers. That will go away during the shutdown. And that would have some major reverberations in parts of America that have been, how shall we say, agitated already. The inner cities where WIC is a really important staple for people to get by. If they don't have WIC, I think it could get ugly. And that's another, flashpoint on the social radar that we have to take into account, that this would affect a certain underclass in our society that will not be all that thrilled about it. And, of course, who will be the bad guys? It will be the Republicans. It will be people like Ted Cruz, who is the poster boy for this now. It will be, quote-unquote, white America. So now we've got some energy happening on a racial, socioeconomic level, which is not positive at all.
Yeah, and they started this with that whole Trayvon Zimmerman thing. That was just disgusting. I mean, they've been fomenting this for a while now.
Yep, absolutely. And if there is, and we don't want to promote fear, but if there is a government shutdown, WIC will be one of the first programs that will suffer at the hands of not having any money allocated to it. So that will have an immediate effect. You're talking 30 days here, where people are running through their WIC assets, and that will be very interesting to watch. And I guarantee you, if you watch TV in America, Fox News, MSN, this will come up. It'll be a very big issue.
Yeah. They're definitely. There seems like there's something. I always get the feeling it's a bit of the calm before the storm. There's this period where it seems like it's a little bit. It's kind of an uneasy calm, and who knows what's going to happen.
That's what it feels like. I mean, that's kind of what I was getting at. It feels as though something has kind of slowed down and abated just a bit, and yet there's also the sense that things have to come to some sort of conclusion. The momentum has been just taking us in this direction, especially with what's happening with the dollar. Now, if there is a reset, where's gold right now, Robert, anyway? What is it per ounce?
What about 1340? I need to check the latest quote, but I think it's around 1330.
1330. Okay. How low do you think it can go?
Oh, remember, when they're selling naked, so they can sell. I mean, they can sell all the gold they want without having it. It's just it's a naked short. They just sell and sell. I think it could go, if they really wanted to, they could push this thing down to, I think, around $1,000. I think. Right. I mean, psychologically, to see gold below $1,000 would be brutal. And what are they going? In my idea, I mean, if I was them, what I would do is I would sell like crazy the paper gold and buy all I could the physical. And 60% of, did you see this about real estate? 60% of transactions in the United States now are cash transactions.
I was not aware of that.
Who do you know buys real estate with cash? I don't know anybody.
Yeah, very few.
I know
very
some
few
people with
people.
some money.
What's that?
So, I think what those people are doing, those cash transactions, are people who are getting out of the dollar. And I think when you see gold, as gold goes down, the physical gold, where is the physical gold?
Right.
I mean, there's the whole physical paper gold thing. I mean, some people say it could be as high as 100 to 1. So imagine tomorrow, the stuff hits the fan, and people say, they have EFTs that they can convert, and the EFTs are going to say, sure, but we're going to pay you in dollars, not in gold.
Yeah.
And 1 in 100 is going to get their gold. And that one will be, of course, we know who that 1% will be.
Absolutely. So, real quick, we're almost out of time. So, on the cash transaction front, do you think that that's the Chinese? Do you think they're the ones buying the real estate?
I think, for example, in Canada, I have pretty good information that it is. Like, for example, that whole Vancouver area that never took a dip. Real estate here, that's all Chinese money. I think in the United States, it could be Chinese money, but I think it's also big American money. People who are getting out of dollars. So when that should be major news, and it's not.
That's significant. I mean, that's a huge number, 60%.
60% cash transactions. This means that people are getting out of. If you want to get out of dollars, what do? You buy equities? No, you buy Caterpillar, Boeing. No,
right.
That will be there on the other side. That stuff will be there. Land, farmland, gold, silver, real assets, and you get dollars.
Real assets.
In.
Yep. Well, this is all fascinating stuff, and I think we're going to find out here over the course of the next 60 days when we run up against the next Pluto-Uranus square, the Mercury retrograde, and all the heavy action, the eclipse, the partial eclipse, which actually does run across the United States. So we're gonna see things, I think, unfold pretty soon, and by the end of November, I think we'll have a much better sense as to whether or not we've dodged another bullet or we are deeply in the throes of some kind of transformation/reset. Robert, thank you for coming on here and spending time and sharing your knowledge. And people want to find out about you, they go to cactusland.com. Is that right?
Right, thecactusland.com. And you can see my books, my latest articles. It's all there.
All right. Well, listen, we'll see you again in a month, and we'll catch up, and we'll find out where we're all headed, okay?
Okay, thanks a lot. I really enjoyed it, man. Take care.
Okay, take care, Robert. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's Robert Bonomo, our man in Russia, from Russia with Love, and getting some interesting insights into the global economy, especially as it relates to home purchases here in the United States. Okay, I will be back on Wednesday, and we'll be navigating the astrological matrix. And Friday, I think we're going to have Sarah Nash and one of Austin's true wildmen, Perry Logan, on with me. Don't miss Friday's show. Until then, use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step on what's possible. This is Robert Phoenix. Have a great day.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.